And Mr. President,
The Senator from Mississippi.
as I said, I'm delighted to rise this afternoon in support of Scott Pruitt, nominee for EPA Administrator, and to congratulate the leadership of this Senate and the administration for persevering on this nomination to the point where we will get a vote tomorrow afternoon and I think be able to end the week on a positive note. My good friend, the senator from North Dakota, had just called for a good bipartisan day on the Senate floor, and support many of the remarks that she made in that regard. I would hope we could begin having some good bipartisan days with regard to the administration's nominations for these important positions. Sadly, it looks as though we will not have a bipartisan vote for Scott Pruitt. He'll be confirmed, but not nearly with the vote he should receive from members on both sides of the aisle who know that there's been extreme overreach on the part of the EPA leadership under the Obama administration, that EPA needs a change in direction, that they need to become more sensible with regard to stopping pollution at the same time being friendly in job creation. And so we'll get this nomination finished tomorrow, and we'll have a good administrator, but regrettably it will not be on a very bipartisan basis. But this is a Scott Pruitt that I've had a chance to learn about since he was nominated in January. The Scott Pruitt that I've had a chance to learn about took on the polluters as Attorney General for his state of Oklahoma and finalized multi-state agreements to limit pollution, and he did so working with Democrats, working with Republicans on a bipartisan basis across the political spectrum, and I think we need that sort of person as EPA Administrator. Scott Pruitt negotiated a water rights settlement with the tribes to preserve scenic lakes and rivers, and I think he's to be congratulated on that, not scolded. He stood up to oil companies and gas companies as Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma and challenged them when they were polluting his state's air and water. And then something I applaud, when the EPA overstepped its bounds and its mission and ceased to follow the law, he challenged the EPA, and I would submit to my colleagues, Mr. President, that that's exactly the sort of balance we need to return as administrator, return to as administrator of the EPA. In the hearing, which was rather extraordinary because of its length, Attorney General Pruitt demonstrated his knowledge, he demonstrated his intellect, and he demonstrated his patience. He was available all day long, an extraordinarily long hearing, answering more than 200 questions propounded at the hearing, and then beyond that, he has now answered more than 1,000 questions for the record. And yet, in spite of this, it's disappointing that some of my colleagues, some of my friends on the other side of the aisle have taken not only to disparaging his qualifications and his suitability for this position, but also engaged in a slow-walking process designed to keep this nomination from even coming forward. Every Democrat boycotted the committee meeting that was called to report this nomination to the floor so that we could even have an up or down vote. They boycotted the meeting, and this is a sort of tactic that we were able to overcome on a parliamentary basis, but it has given us what now we know is the slowest confirmation process in 225 years, Mr. President, where the only president to have a slower confirmation process was the one that was getting it all kicked off to start with. George Washington was a bit slower, but we'll see. Maybe we could if this keeps going, we could surpass the slowness of the confirmation process that occurred for our first president. Mr. President, we need a change at EPA. The American people are ready for a change in EPA. We need an EPA administrator who will listen to the environmentalists, but also listen to the job creators. This means listening to the election, but moving past the election and getting on to filling the positions that are important to Americans, like the EPA administrator. Most Americans believe we can protect the environment and still protect job creators. And so does Attorney General Scott Pruitt. Most Americans believe we can have clean air and water without destroying thousands upon thousands of jobs for Americans. That's what I believe. That's what Scott Pruitt believes. I would quote from a recent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which William McGurn wrote in support of Mr. Pruitt, but also generally in support of other nominations. But with regard to Pruitt, Mr. McGurn says this, and I quote, "The fierce opposition to Mr. Pruitt speaks to the progressive fear that he might help restore not only science to its rightful place, but also federalism." And I think that's what Scott Pruitt is going to be about when he is confirmed tomorrow and finally gets down to working for us, the taxpayers, as administrator of EPA. This is about the 1-month mark in this administration, and we are slowly getting past this unprecedented slow walk effort by our colleagues. I certainly hope with the 1,100 other appointments that have to be submitted and have to be spoken to by this Senate that we can hasten up the process so we can pass legislation and be about the business that our constituents sent us here to do. Approving Attorney General Scott Pruitt would allow us to move forward with the people's business with a man who has demonstrated courtesy, intelligence, patience, and professionalism, and I will be honored to be one of those voting yes tomorrow when we confirm this outstanding candidate as EPA.